Today on the newscast, is Israel preparing for a coming showdown with Iran? And could it happen sooner rather than later? Get all the breaking details next. Hey folks, welcome to the Watchman newscast. A very quick intro today before we get into it. If you have not subscribed yet, be sure to click that notification bell and subscribe so you get alerts every time a new video is posted. Hey, we're posting every day, Monday through Friday, and sometimes on the weekend depending on the news cycle. So you don't want to miss any of our updates here on the Watchman newscast. And speaking of the news cycle, we've got a busy one today. We're going to break down an exclusive brand new poll from Israel, a poll that has some staggering numbers in it regarding the Iranian threat and what the Israeli people think about a potential strike against Iran's nuclear facilities. Then we'll look at the continued fighting between Israel and Palestinian Islamic Jihad in Gaza. Is this thing winding down, or could it flare up again? We'll talk about that as well. And then an update on Russia, Ukraine, and how that conflict is continuing to have ripple effects around the world, including right in the Middle East. Before we get into it, just a quick reminder to subscribe if you haven't done so already. We're posting every day, Monday through Friday, and sometimes on the weekend, depending on the news cycle, so you don't want to miss any of our updates. Okay, let's jump right into it. Is Israel preparing for a showdown with Iran? Well, ENet News out of Israel is reporting that Israel is indeed preparing for a potential all-out war against Iran. And that includes not only the Iranian regime, but also Iran's proxies, in particular Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. Now, ENet News reports that Israel's Home Front Command is preparing for a full-scale war with Iran. It says this is part of a broader assessment that the situation throughout the region continues to deteriorate. Now, remember, we reported here on the newscast last week that Israel's defense ministry has been stockpiling bomb kits for civilians to use in the event of a large-scale attack. And they've been taking other measures as well, in particular, building bomb shelters. Now, Israel's Home Front Command is responsible for protecting the civilian population in Israel, of course. And they are warning that in a coming war which they believe is inevitable with Iran, there will likely be an Iranian aerial bombardment campaign against Israel. This could come by way of ballistic missiles and attack drones. So Israel is preparing accordingly, making sure that its citizens know what to do and have the tools they need in order to survive such an attack. So Iran and its proxies certainly would love nothing more than to replicate what Hamas did last October 7th on Israeli soil. Remember, surprise, surprise, Iran wasn't too happy with that. They wanted it to happen, and it didn't fully happen on Israeli soil. You had some attacks in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, but really the bulk of the attacks were along the Gaza border and in southern Israel. But I'm sure that the Iranian regime was a little disappointed that more Israeli cities were not hit, and that more Israelis were not killed and injured that day. That's why they are, in my view, continuing to support Hamas right now as they rebuild in Gaza. But Iran would love to see those kind of scenes repeated across Israel. Iranian flags flying over Jerusalem, Tehran calling the shots in the streets of Tel Aviv, and Israeli blood running through the streets of Netanyahu and Hadera. Folks, that is Iran's ultimate goal. That's why we call them the head of the snake. Take out the head of the snake. Take out the Iranian regime, because as long as they're in power, there will be no peace for the entire region. The Iranian regime exports terror, and as long as they're in power, there will be no lasting peace. Folks, that's why Israel is preparing to strike Iran's nuclear facilities. It's why Israel has been so adamant in recent weeks, saying a strike is inevitable. I covered a story last week where Israeli leaders said that a strike against Iran's nuclear facilities is inevitable. You can't allow Iran to acquire the bomb. Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister, has often said, you can't allow Iran to acquire the bomb and get away with it. So Israel is preparing for a major showdown. And as we discussed yesterday on the newscast, Israel has a window to strike, perhaps until September. After that, Iran may be able to break out and have a bomb. So Israel needs to act sooner rather than later. Speaking of acting sooner rather than later, Israel's striking in Syria. Yesterday, we reported that 2 Iranian-backed attacks were carried out against Israel. One, a drone attack against an Israeli-owned oil tanker off the coast of Oman. And no. 2, a missile attack by Iran-backed militias in Syria against Israeli troops stationed along the Golan Heights. Israel responded in a major way both times. They responded to that drone attack, killing at least 34 of the attackers, according to Syrian state media. And Israel reportedly responded to that missile attack out of Syria as well. Now we're getting word that 2 children were killed in that strike in Syria. 2 children were killed in the rubble when their building collapsed. They were living in a building next to the target that Israel struck. So sad to hear that. We pray for the families who lost children in this. And no doubt Iran is looking to avenge this and will try to carry out more attacks against Israel. As we come to you around 1 p.m. Eastern Time on Tuesday, August 2, fighting between Israel and Palestinian Islamic Jihad in Gaza does appear to be winding down. Remember, it's been 5 days since the ceasefire went into effect. Israel has allowed in some humanitarian aid, some food, some medical supplies into Gaza. There are still some, kinks to be worked out in terms of getting that aid into Gaza. But overall, it does appear that Islamic Jihad and Israel are committed to this ceasefire for now. Still, there are questions about whether this is going to hold. Will it be a lasting ceasefire, or is it just a temporary pause in the hostilities so that both sides can regroup and get ready for the next round? Only time will tell. What I can tell you is that Israel has made it clear that this operation is not over. Israel struck Islamic Jihad yesterday in the West Bank, also known as Judea and Samaria, the biblical heartland. And they made it clear that this operation is far from over. In fact, the Israeli Defense Forces said yesterday that the arrest operation, quote, is just beginning. So they're stepping up the tempo in the West Bank, Judea, and Samaria. And as we've documented here on the newscast, the attacks against Israelis in the West Bank, or Judea and Samaria, as Israel calls it, have continued unabated since that October 7th attack last year. Israeli soldiers and Israeli civilians have been gunned down, stabbed, and even run over in some cases by Palestinian terrorists in the West Bank, in particular in the city of Hebron. So Israel is looking to put a stop to that. And as I mentioned, they struck yesterday Islamic Jihad positions in the West Bank. And Israel is working with Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas and his forces, security forces, to try to tamp down the violence in the West Bank. Abbas came out over the weekend and condemned the October 7th attack last year. He called it terrorism, which was interesting to hear. But will he crack down on these terrorists who are carrying out these attacks? Will he go after their families and dismantle their terror infrastructure in the West Bank? Time will tell. Last thing to mention, Russia, Ukraine, and the ripple effects in the Middle East. We talked yesterday about that devastating drone strike in the Russian city of Kursk. Well, Israel reportedly helped Ukraine with intelligence on that strike. Now, Ukraine denied it. They said, hey, we had nothing to do with this. This was not our strike. But Russia believes that Israel provided intel to Ukraine on that strike. And now, Russia is threatening Israel. They're saying, hey, if you get involved in this conflict, we will have a response. And that response, of course, will be targeting Israel. Folks, that's something to keep an eye on. Could Russia's involvement in Syria increase? And how will that affect Israel's freedom of movement to strike Iran's nuclear facilities? Pray for wisdom for Israeli leaders as they make these life-or-death decisions. A lot going on in the world's most volatile and chaotic region, the Middle East. Keep it right here on the Watchman Newscast. We will continue to bring you all the breaking details every single day, Monday through Friday, and sometimes on the weekend depending on the news cycle. Until tomorrow, thanks so much for joining us. God bless you, and remember, never hold your peace. Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the newscast. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss an upload. Tap the bell icon so you're notified every time a new video is posted. And don't forget to share your thoughts, insights, and comments below. Thanks for watching. We'll see you back here tomorrow.